Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. We want to thank the people also online. Thank you for spending a couple of hours with us, for the people here at the Cabral Center in Boston. And I am Francesca Grippa, and I'm a faculty here at Northeastern University. And we are happy to coordinate this first effort to really start a discussion on barriers and opportunities to promote supplier diversity in higher education. Together with my colleagues, Carl Zanger, Yambok Ru, we welcome you today, and we want to special thank to the Northeastern Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and also to our Dean for the College of Professional Studies for the continuous support. We wanted to start with a couple of data just to, to kick us off and see how things are the status of the, the supplier diversity and what's out there. So we selected a couple of data. So the first is from the WGBH report from 2020 that showed how, out of 700 active contracts that were awarded by a large university in Massachusetts, only 2% went to minority-owned businesses that were certified by the state. And another data we wanted to start with was a study that was conducted by the National Association of Educational Procurement in 2013 showed that 91% of the expenditure of the 42 colleges and universities interviewed were always with the same 20% of vendors. So this is one of the things that we, one of the considerations that we, despite the commitment to promote and increase diversity, it is still, there is still much to do. So this is a challenge that we accepted, and together, of course, with President Joseph Aoun and his call to action, and the promise to double the value of the contracts awarded to minority-owned and women-owned with a specific focus on Black-owned businesses in 5 years. It's definitely an ambitious plan, but we are here to contribute for whatever we can to the discussion. 1 hour, 2 hours is not enough, we know, but this is only the initial conversation, and we want you to know that. So quickly, what we did, we accepted the challenge as well. We launched this a project, and in fall 2021, we interviewed small, diverse businesses that were doing business not only with Northeastern University, with all colleges and universities. The respondents, we had a decent number of responses, 359. The majority of them were self-identifying themselves as women-led or minority-owned businesses. Most of them were active in construction, scientific and technical services, and marketing and communication. Most of them were certified by the Massachusetts Supplier Diversity Office and the SBA. The report has much more data. You all have it, and for the participants online, you will receive it via email after the symposium is over. And not surprisingly, also the size of these the small businesses that they were really small and micro businesses. 84% of them had less than 50 employees, but most of them had been in operation for 11 years. We'd say at least in every 11 years, just to say that they had enough experience to provide some feedback about their struggles and their frustrations, but also some of the ideas. So a lot of them had ideas, and I welcome everybody to dig in a lot of the details that the report is containing about suggestions, very practical suggestions that I'm sure our panelists had the chance to review and we can discuss today. We asked several questions in the survey, and all of them were really going around 3 main questions. Why do minority business owners feel so frustrated by higher education procurement practices, and what makes it difficult? What is the pain point, and what are the pain points, and how can we help them navigate the process in a way that would make them successful? And then we really were interested in what skills and knowledge, what do they need to know, what kind of knowledge do they need to really be successful? How can Northeastern University, but also some of the colleagues in the, from other universities that are here, what can we do? We are an education institution. What can we do to offer them the knowledge that they're lacking? And we will see some of them mentioning exactly that lack of knowledge, lack of understanding, the process is too complex, so we'll see in a second. So to address these questions, we invited our panelists to really dig a little bit more, little deeper. So around the room here, but also at home, there are representatives from the vendors side. We have representatives from advocates, I would like to call them, and so institutions who can help Northeastern, in general, colleges and universities to move the needle, but also representatives of procurement teams. So we wanted to have a very, we invite different people to provide different perspective, because this is a complex, it's not an easy challenge, and so the more perspective we can get, the better it is. So I'll introduce our panelists here. I'll start with Michael Henderson. Michael is a Chief Procure-to-Pay Officer here at Northeastern University. He has more than 17 years of experience of combined procurement and global operation, and specializing in P2P execution and transformation. Thank you for being here, Michael. Gordon Thompson is the CEO of Westnet, a distributor of medical and surgical supplies. Thompson Company has sold more than $2 million worth of PPEs, I guess now probably higher than what I have here, to Northeastern University since the beginning of the pandemic. Thank you, Gordon, for being here. Tim Singleton is the Associate Director of Construction at Wellesley College. He has over 32 years of experience in construction project management and has worked with education and healthcare as well. Thank you, Tim, for being here. Then we have Karen. Hi, Karen. She's Executive Vice President at the Associated Industries of Massachusetts, and she's also a member of CHIEF, a private network built to drive more women into position of power and keep them there. Thank you, Karen. And Margarita Polanco is the Regional Supplier Diversity Manager at DPR Construction, recently also at Suffolk Construction. She has extensive experience managing workforce diversity compliance initiatives to help organizations meet the goals and the requirements with regard to minority, women, and people with disabilities. So thank you, Margarita. Last but not least, Vamshita Kalapalli is a civil engineer and an entrepreneur. He is the CEO of Turva, and as a CEO, he has led projects in many states and organizations, including Harvard University, Northeastern University, and UMass, and the Faber Cancer Institute. Thank you. So we'll dig right in. So we, little bit of just, the way we're going to organize this is I'm going to ask our panelists to react to some of the highlights of the survey. There are a couple of highlights that we have, and so there will be a time for them to react, very informal. Again, this is a moment to share our experience. And then we really hope to have, we're trying to have time also to get a couple of questions. If there is any questions online, our colleague Yang will be coordinating that. So the first thing I wanted to react, is the barriers to doing business. So these are 5 main areas that we identified in the survey. I'll read them so that. So the first, one of the first perceived barriers was the low awareness of bids and opportunities. They don't know that they exist. Sometimes they say they go on to website and there is a registration fee, and it's too large, and like it's indicating that there is favoring large organizations, large contractors. And of course, we're talking here not about Northeastern University. We're talking about, the question that we asked them was about barriers regarding doing business with higher education institutions. So it was very general. I wanted to, just to make sure we we refer to that. So there was also a mention of the lack of relationship with existing large suppliers. I think, in my opinion, this is a very interesting and point will personally to dig in. They mentioned that it takes too much time to fill out, understand what it takes to fill out a request for a proposal, the RFP, to the point that they would need a full-time staff. You know, they say there is a lack of staff devoted to opportunity seeking. They don't have time to do it. They're small micro businesses, so they don't have this. And of course, confusing contract terms. Many of them mentioned also the bureaucracy that goes beyond. They don't have the language that changes from one department to the other, from one college to the other. So it's a full-time job, they say. So I'd like to ask our panelists to quickly, I know we have a timekeeper, to go and comment on what are your perspectives. I'll start with, maybe this time I'll start with Michael, who just sit next to me. Your perspective, your example, something that, a reaction to this.
Sure, let me make sure everyone can hear me. I'll start with the low awareness of bids and opportunities. So this is something, it's not just higher ed. I would say this is more endemic across multiple different areas, but specific to higher ed, a lot of the challenge is around investment of creating essentially bid boards or broader, essentially bid portals. Add to that planning. I see with our own institution and hopefully also Wellesley, typically CapEx investments tend to be planned out over multiple year horizons, so they tend to have the mechanisms to be better at promoting supplier diversity, where a lot of the other kind of OpEx heavy spend tends to be, I need something, how do I get it now? So it's having the right planning cycle, having the right visibility, simplifying the broader practice of how you submit a bid, how that bid is reviewed, and then making sure that there's a feedback loop, right? That's one thing my own team is working on, is how do we make sure that when we get bids in, that we're actually responding with why someone wasn't selected, rather than just, hey, thanks for, typically the business owner, spending your weekend building this great RFP package, and never again will you know why you weren't selected. I don't want to hog the time, so I will certainly pass the mic.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First, I just want to thank Northeastern for addressing this topic. It's very critical in terms of economic impact. Our company has been very fortunate. It's been a 28-year of existence as a going concern. But to get to the question, I think barriers on both sides of the ledger. If you talk about academia, the question is leadership of academia driving supplier diversity where administration, such as procurement, is being measured by their due diligence? So how far down does this value reach in terms of those that are in the trenches that really manage the transactions? On the other side of the ledger, you know, there has to be due diligence by the entrepreneur, by the diversity business. It's not like it's going to come knocking at the door. So one of the things you mentioned, Francesca, is there's a national association of education procurement. And here it would be the New England, which comprises of your New England higher education. And sometimes diversity entities only think that they need to attend diverse events as opposed to at-large events. So, you know, my recommendation would be that any diverse company, but any diverse company do their due diligence, because There are organizations out there that have events that allow you to have access to cultivate relationships.
Thank you. Where do I want to start with this? So I've been doing this diversity exercise for about 22 years in Philadelphia, New York City, and Massachusetts, and it's given me the opportunity to see a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily go well, and it's been the same conversation the whole time. And I think the questions are the same, the answers are the same. So we at Wellesley College, we had a roundtable meeting 3 years ago where a bunch of owners and contractors and designers came. We met again about 6 months later. We met again about 7 or 8 months ago. And the gist of it is we're trying to change the conversation from looking at percentages to something different. Because I think, I'll say me, because not everybody necessarily agrees, is that I think that the focus on percentages is what's driving the lack of change and diversity. So we're trying to figure out what else, what are the options that we can do to make a difference. And I'll give you an example. I've done a lot of projects, Massachusetts, public and private, but I'll use public because they're easier. So the focus is on percentages, and you've got to meet 17% women, minority contractors, subcontractors, and vendors. So what do? You pick the larger firms because you get to that number first. And what happens, you use the same vendors over and over again, nothing changes. So how do we change that? So one of the small things that we're doing at Wellesley College, we can because we're kind of quirky, is I tell the contractors is that you need to do a difference. We want you to do something other than tell us you met 17%. And the example I give them is I'd rather have you have 10 little firms that represent maybe 1% but are new to the industry than to meet the 17 or 20 or 50%. And it's huge. It's a lot of work. And some of them get it. Actually, a lot of them get it. But they're like, well, I got to meet the percentage. No, you don't. You got to do the right thing. So we want to get those firms in our industry that haven't done it before. So if it's contractors, vendors, suppliers, whatever it might be, invite these people. But the problem is it's work for us. So if you're the contractor, you're the owner, to find these firms is hard to do. They reach out to us, but you got to reply, and then you got to meet them. And some of them, to be honest, aren't very good. And some are, some aren't. You got to deal with it. But some of them, almost all of them, don't know how to do it. So you've got to take the time to bring them in and say, you know what, this is how you bid things here. This is what we're looking for. I'm going to talk too long, sorry. But the example that I want to use is painting on our campus, because it just happened recently. We have she's here, I think. Maybe not. We had a painting bid go out on some work on campus, and the painter was a high-end residential painter. So you come onto our campus and you want to paint a dorm or an academic building. What we're looking for in our building is throw some paint on a wall, all right? And it's the same color. You got to match the colors. You don't even got to cut it. So how do you price that? That wall looks good. You don't even got to paint it. Paint that wall over there. But how do you paint that? You don't know how to do that. You're going to put your square foot number, and your number is going to be 3 times the number of the other vendors, which is what happened. And I'm telling my PMs, I'm getting excited, sorry. The scope is different, but my PMs, they don't want to do the work. That's the part of our problem is they're like, the number's too high, throw them out. No, you got to educate them to show them how to price this stuff. And if you don't do that, they're never going to get in. And that's just a very small example of all of the industries that come to our campus with small vendors that are women and minority owned. They just don't know how to do it. And we've got to step back and say, this is what we expect. And you can try to bid it. They probably won't get it the first time, but maybe the second time or third time, they'll figure it out. And I'll stop here. All right, sorry.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Before I respond to barriers, let me just give you a little bit of context. So I work for Associated Industries of Massachusetts, affectionately known as AIM. We are one of the largest business associations across Massachusetts, and we specialize in advocacy, public policy advocacy, HR solutions, et cetera, with the goal of really trying to impact the Massachusetts economy in positive ways, et cetera. So after the death of George Floyd, we decided we were going to try an initiative to move opportunities for Black and brown businesses with the 3,400 members that we have. Not so easy. These barriers are very real. All of these barriers are very real. I'm probably the least knowledgeable on this panel, but because we've been doing some of the research and the work to get this done, things have become, pretty obvious that this is tough business. So a lot of these organizations do not have connections to firms. When we did a little bit of research to ask, where do you need help? It's how do I even get in the door? How do I navigate to find the right people to talk to? Think about Northeastern Youth Diversity, and I see a couple of friends, because I actually did some consulting here before. I see a couple of friends here, and I think about when I was here and trying to procure or get someone to work with. It is completely decentralized. And even if President Aoun is saying it from the top that we want to have this happen, the decisions are being made in other areas of the organization, all over the organization. So how do you pull that together so people really realize this is serious and this is what we want to do? So that connection, that bringing the message down from the top and getting everyone on the same board is really, really tough. Another barrier is something, I'm really underscoring some things that other folks have said, is that even if you get to the area of execution, if there are long-standing vendor relationships there, how do you dislodge that? And the thing is, you may not want to dislodge that, but can you give somebody else just a piece of that business? You don't have to give them 100%, but give the opportunity to them of giving them 20% of the business, and your incumbent gets 80%. But it's a risk, and someone may not want to take that risk as a procurement officer, because guess what? My job is on the line. So somehow, organizations have to step up and pay people to do this. You must incent people to take the risk to do this, or else it's not going to happen.
Thank you.
Margarita. That's the point. I wanted to touch on that point, but I'm going to kind of come off the panel and also chime in on that. A lot of this, what we're talking about here, is the same issue that not just Northeastern, not just a Wellesley College would have across the board. This is happening across the nation, in Massachusetts, in our local communities. I'm more focused on my end on facilitating opportunities for outreach. How do small businesses know about bidding opportunities? Where are we posting the bidding opportunities? How are we reaching out to the local community in a way where it's understandable? If your business is based in Brockton, Massachusetts, and you're doing an outreach in Waltham, Massachusetts, how do small businesses get there? It just doesn't make sense. So how do we think strategically about where we're posting our information? How do small businesses get the information so that they can be a part of those opportunities to bid? I'm coming from the construction side, so I'm in the local community. I'm in Roxbury, I'm in Dorchester, I'm in Mattapan. I'm looking for businesses that are MBE-based, Latinx-based, Asian-based, that are really have a lot of experience. Tim, you hit on something here that we don't know what those businesses are. How do we get to them? They're right in front of us. It's just the way that we're reaching out to them. I want to touch on two relationships because I think that's really important right now. We don't have a direct contact for someone to get to in order to follow up through things. Where are the documents kept? Who do I reach out to in order to have a conversation with them? I think it's really important that small businesses have a mentor, somebody to guide them through the process so that they can understand where they need to be in the building, who they need to meet with, what kind of documents they need to bring to the table. But outside of that, throughout the process, especially in construction, day to day, I need a direct person to be working with on that job site because it's important. Where does my workforce need to be? If I'm not doing something right, give me on-site feedback about those things so that I know that for the next opportunity, I know where to be at and I know how to consider not making mistakes in my project. There's so many areas that small businesses need to be aware of, but I think, again, as to your point, we all need to do a better job about sharing information and keeping people aware of what's happening in this space. And just to touch outside of the goal, it's more about creating economic accessibility to all of this work. We got to do a better job at stop looking at the percentages and think about how many dollars are going back into localized communities so people are staying focused about the dollars that are coming back into the community. And I'll touch on that.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for this opportunity. I'll speak from a very different perspective, focus strictly on what we have here. Being a small business owner, going through the process of finding opportunities, finding RFPs is challenging. On the state side in Massachusetts, you have COMBI's central registry where you have access to some information. But the higher education, where there's a little bit more incentive for minority businesses to go after work, like Northeastern's, the Harvards, Dana-Farber's, where there's a little bit more emphasis than the public sector. It's very challenging to know where are the RFPs, where are this information posted, because majority of them are invitation only. You usually get from the owner side to the vendor, which means you need to be in the system to begin with. So how do you get into the system? That's its whole other challenge where you don't know who to talk to, whatnot. In my case, I'm very fortunate. I'll give you how we started. I was working on Harvard campus, then decided to go on my own. So Harvard helped me start my business. So I was growing from within the organization where people were helping me how to go about navigate the process. I wasn't the guy from outside who has like no idea where to go to. And then if you don't have those relationships and find the RFPs, you don't know where to look for work. Once you identify the opportunity and there's an RFP, if you look at any of the traditional RFPs from any of these institutions, look at the requirements. They are tailored. Most of them are templates from 15, 20 years where you need 5 projects of this experience, this. That will, as a small business, applying for the first time, 99% of the time, you will not qualify for the list of requirements that are there, even insurance. And then if you get through all those, you are by yourself as a small business owner, you don't have a marketing department, you're putting the proposal together, running to Kinko's, making 10 copies, mailing it. It all costs money, $1,500 to $2,000 a proposal. How is a small business going to afford to do all these things? A better way to look at this would be, at least the pandemic gave opportunities to do electronic submissions. At least from where I sit, and how to make a meaningful impact would be allocating a percentage of work to the minority firms, not looking at what they have done in the past, how relevant it is, but giving them an opportunity, train them on the job, senior leadership support, knowing that this is a risky endeavor. We know, especially like Tim said, a classroom has to operate. Students need to come to class, researchers need to do their research. In this confines, in higher education, how do you pick those projects where small businesses can come, learn and grow and develop resources to do more work in the future? Thank you.
Thank you, Anshi. So we heard about outreach, communication, we heard about simplifying the process. So we're going now, so I'd like to give the opportunity to any of the panelists react to each other before we move to what can we do, the next part of the, if anybody wants to react to anybody. I think we're ready to, move because what Vamshi, but many others of team, we were going on in the direction, okay, these are things that we could do. So we collected some themes around the responses that we have. Again, I invite everybody to look at the report. There are great additional details. But some of the major themes were, one, creating a single point of contact. Some of I heard, in the survey, but also here today, I think Tim was mentioning that's decentralized. So it's not talking about Northeastern, everywhere. We've been asking, as part of this survey, we've been interviewing people at Harvard, other university procurement teams, and there is an awareness that the process is decentralized, so there is much more to do in terms of organizing to help small companies to succeed. So that single point of contact was one big element. A single point of contact not for just specifically for minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses. So one single point of contact was always probably the 90% of them mentioned. And then simplification and better explanation of the RFP process, as we mentioned. Of course, shorten the payment terms. That's always there. It's always helpful for a small business. Providing clear information how to navigate the complex process. Many mentioned creating opportunities like this for networking, but also video tutorials. Anything that in simple terms can explain that's how you can do business with us. And also creating a vendor network that includes also information not only about large vendors, but how are these large vendors doing business with minority-owned small contractors? So having that additional information could be helpful, because then probably, as to remember who mentioned that, having maybe Karen, like 20% giving, yes, it's hard to keep away from those vendor relationships. They become your friends, you trust them, you know that you can rely on them. But how are those people, the 20% that we saw in the survey that always do business with colleges and university, what are they doing in terms of, not to put Margarita on the spot, but just as an example, how is DPR or Suffolk Construction, what are they doing? Should we, if we contract with them, how are they doing? How are they promoting or tackling this problem? So, and then finally, expanding certification beyond the existing one. So we, in the survey, there were many people referring to, what the certification that they had, but many of them felt that it was not enough. So these were some of the opportunities that were mentioned. And again, round robin, just checking with you, each of you, if you want to expand on some of that, or you want have experience in any of these, what can we do? Or you can also say something more like, what should we be doing? What can Northeastern and Wellesley and Harvard and all the others do to help? How about we do the opposite? Do we start with Vamshi this time?
Thank you, Francesca. I think one of the big things is the RFP process, I believe, giving minority businesses a single point of contact is very useful, but as a small business owner, you are wearing multiple hats, you are running around. Are you able to effectively go through the list of all the websites on a regular basis to look at the opportunities? Or is it a better way where the university or the higher ed, they reach out on a regular basis and, hey, these are the things. How do we make the information more accessible without the business owner who is trying to do his payroll, trying to get his resources, trying to chase other project, putting the fires out? How can the business owner be in a position to have this information much accessible and try to see if that opportunity is right for him too? That's a very important thing. The resources that a small business have very limited. They just cannot go on casting a large net. If Northeastern or Mike says, okay, we have a painting contractor, 10,000 to 50,000, 50,000 to 100,000, different tiers, and there's a group of vendors you have that will be more than happy to play in a certain range. When you go and provide them opportunity, that essentially takes out the RFP process, the insurance requirements, and the various other things. And one very critical thing, I think Tim touched on a little bit, you ask anybody working in higher ed, every university, every college is unique, they're very special, their requirements are like nobody, they are like the most unique. You will never understand how important they are, how unique their project is. In that context, it is very challenging for Tims and Northeasterns of the world to just bring anybody on board, right? You need a lot of hand-holding. You need to train them, teach them how to work in this particular environment without a researcher getting upset or the classes getting disrupted. So when you combine opportunities that really suit, that work for the particular company, and hand-holding, giving them the training and the education they need, that's how they'll be successful. And then you'll build that relationship, and then they'll become your trusted vendor. Then you can do repeat business.
Thank you.
And I think that's important. So it's education, it's mentorship, it's guidance, it's hand-holding the process until I think both parties on both ends could find the loyalty and trust in doing business with each other. I think that's important. From the small business to learn, to be educated consistently. And I think Northeastern would be a good idea, maybe a quarterly kind of, how to do business with Northeastern. Here's what's coming up. This is what you could do. This is what's coming up in the contracts that we have built out in the next 5 years. We want to meet you now, meet you where you're at right now, so that you can learn our process, since it's so significant and so different from everybody else. I love training. I love mentorship. I like when we can put small businesses together and have them mentor each other. They're going through the same struggles and hurdles, and how do we bring a prime subcontractor who's doing big business to mentor other small businesses? And Northeastern could, facilitate opportunities like that so that everybody's learning with each other and everybody's gaining the access and opportunity with each other for those future contracts that you guys know that you're going to have, to do business. I think that's important.
Yeah.
So I want to follow up on a point that you made a little bit earlier, which is to structure the RFPs in ways that these organizations have opportunities to compete. Things like the requirements of the insurance, the payment terms. That is just really a huge obstacle. I had my own business for a little bit, and 60 days sometimes is really ugly. So, you need to structure things in ways that make it, tenable for people to do this type of business. The other thing I would say in terms of ways we can do things a little bit differently, perhaps, I know it's tough with percentages, but if you do have a large piece of business and you're structuring an RFP, can you put something in that RFP for that large business that says, you need to do business with X percentage of minority-owned or women-owned businesses, because then that pulls them along as well, right? I think for organizations the size of Northeastern, et cetera, you also need to be extremely organized. And what I mean by that is you need to go in and figure out what is the spend that you have. What's the spend that you have? When is that spend coming up? Because, in our business, I'm reaching out to introduce people to various large firms looking for opportunities. They have contracts out there that they made 5 years ago or something, and they can't break the contract. So you're telling me, I've got a facilities contract, but you can't break that. So where are the opportunities? Line them out so you can see, here's where I have some spend. And if one more firm tells me they can't find minority firms, I'm going to scream, okay? We have BECMA. We have Amplify Latinx. I see Betty Francisco out there. We have Boston Impact Initiative. We have Supplier Diversity Office of Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We have AIM. Don't tell me you can't find minority firms. Don't tell me that. Okay, I'm done.
I just want to say, I think that Wellesley College and our owners group, including Northeastern, I think that we're a little bit ahead of the curve. We get all these items that are up here. A couple of things I want to say is our group is an owners consortium. We've created a team's website, and we list vendors that we know that are women or minority owned. And it's in its infancy, and it's not perfect yet. But the idea is that all of us owners, includes Harvard Business, Mass General Brigham, Northeastern, Wentworth, a whole bunch of the colleges and universities, healthcare, museums. We've got together, we meet once a month, and we're trying to create this list of vendors, and that's our way of just finding more of those vendors and sharing what we know. I think, but the scary part, I think, for us is that if we meet a vendor that we don't know anything about, it's not likely we're going to give them work. There's got to be some sort of a reference of anything so that we say, okay, that firm, they know how to paint, or they can supply this. There's got to be some kind of a website or somebody that can say that firm is good, okay, put them on the list. That for us, that works. We just got to make that list bigger. There's also one thing I want to say. I try to be positive, but it's not necessarily. It's really important, and I know that it happens because I've been doing this a long time and I see it all the time, is that sometimes it gets in the head of somebody that if I want to hire this firm, one, I got to pay more, and two, they're going to make a lot of money. And the reality is that is the case sometimes, because sometimes some vendors know that they got to pay you more because they got to meet a percentage. That perception's got to change. Otherwise, people don't want to do it. And it can't cost more for the owner, or they're not going to do it. You got to be competitive. You've got to have that in your head. You've got to learn how to be competitive so that your firm is more efficient, so you can compete, and just go from there. I'll stop.
Thank you.
Well, I'll probably be repetitive to what I last said, but let me pick on Northeastern since Director of Procurement is sitting next to me. As an example, the higher education can do outreach in terms of trade shows, diversity trade shows. In the last 28 years, we've been to probably 10, headed by higher education, but none with any consistency. So in terms of any inertia behind Northeastern's initiative to enhance, that's a recommendation I do. I would say. Also, let me just promote directors of procurement that have been very genuine, or MBE administrators who have been very genuine. There's Jerry Epps here, who is at, where are you, Jerry, at Babson or Bentley? One of those. I can't remember the gentleman's name. I think he's here from Children's Hospital. I'm going to drop some names. Jeff DiCiaccio, who is one of the directors of procurement at Harvard Medical School.
He's online.
Okay, he's
listening.
online.
Yeah, he's
okay,
listening
but
to
this
you,
is,
man.
here's a weakness. Jeff is online because I called him last night, not because Northeastern went out there and went to MIT and UMass and Harvard and said, we'd like you to participate, and, you know, at least virtually. Yeah, okay, well, what I'm saying is, Jeff, are you in procurement?
I am the Associate Director of Supplier Diversity.
Okay, but at the end of the day, who makes the decision? Procurement. And those procurement needs to participate in these things, not just the MBE officer, because there are people who are very genuine and very sincere about the initiatives and the goals of supplier diversity that head up procurement. You know, I know that for a fact because we're a beneficiary of those people. But, you know, on the other side, there has to be due diligence. I understand the constraints as a small business. You know, we started off from a paperclip and rubber band. But you have to do the due diligence in terms of knowing Michael Henderson and what his responsibilities are. And you have to start there. And nurturing relationships, cultivating relationships.
It's a tough act to follow. Lots of great points. So I guess I'm situated a little good last. So this is kind of a who's who of how to do it better, right? Having a single point of contact. I know it's something we're working on. Northeastern is a big institution with a lot of colleges that all have different budgets. So striking the balance between enabling the institution to be very entrepreneurial while at the same time having just the smidgen of governance to make sure we're thinking through all the different vertices of how we spend money. Payment terms, by the way, shout out, we are net 35. But yeah, absolutely, there's always flexibility in having shorter payment terms. I mean, cash is king. When you're a small business, cash is king. The RFP process, I touched on it briefly earlier. There's a lot of opportunity. So I have, I guess, the insight. I used to bid on work all the time. Worked for different organizations. Now I'm on this side of the fence. And yeah, there's always opportunity, right? I think one of the things we sometimes fall into, and I'm staring at Rosanna because she and I have worked in this, is our teams get busy, so we default to the same mechanisms that we did for the last one. And we know the excuse, but the reality is there's opportunities to say, hey, this bid is different than the last. Do we need to have the same set of requirements? Can we rethink how we bid this relative to the risk of said contract? I'll just end on saying there's always opportunity to do outreach, especially as we think of really empowering all the neighborhoods that certainly Northeastern touches, but I'm sure for Wellesley and for Babson and for others. There's always opportunities to look at your large prime vendors, right? The people that are very hard to unseat because somebody knows somebody dating back 30 years. We all know those firms. There is opportunity to say, hey, there should be a flow down, right? If we as an institution, and I know spend percentage isn't the best measure, but it is a measure, to say, hey, look, you know, folks like KPMG, or someone who's not here, that's why I'm I'm like racking my brain. It's important for us that you carry our values forward. You are our partner. You amplify the impact we have to those communities that we serve. You're going to carry our goal, and we're going to start asking you. And if you can't meet it when we get to the next recompete, it's going to be some sort of demerit. So there's a ton of opportunity, and I guess that's it.
Thank you.
One other thing.
Yeah.
With regard to the constraints of cash flow, typically for a small business, relative to a large institution that may have 90-day terms or 60-day terms, there is a product out there called supply chain financing, is one of the terminologies. Citibank is a participant in it, and I think it's something worth the large institution offering and negotiating with their bank to offer to help, if you will, bridge that gap. Because many, small business typically are struggling just on 30-day terms. What supply chain financing does is the cost of the receivable, if you will, of financing the receivable, meaning the bank pays you within 30 days, you, the vendor. You carry the cost of the receivable for the differential between, let's say it's 90-day terms, you're carrying the cost for those 60 days at an annual rate, but it's the rate of the large institution. So it really comes out to really maybe 0.1%. And, that cost of carrying, really versus the cost of being, the benefit of being paid expeditiously outweighs the cost of carrying that money, so to speak. So, if you're working on 10%, 20%, 30% margins, you're talking about 1 or 0.2% in terms of your cost of sale. So, that is something from a vendor standpoint, you might want to challenge the institution, if you will, to implement that or negotiate that, if you will, and challenge them in terms of their initiative towards, bridging this gap of receivable turnover, so to speak.
Thank you. Any last comment? It's time for questions now, but if there is any, would like to, there is a mic here. You can have this, the 2 microphones. We would like to invite anybody here and as well online, if there are any questions already, to promote the discussion, provide your perspective. I know we have, friends and in other institutions, and if you feel like asking questions to our panelists, promote the discussion, please, now it's the time. Yes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Kurt Frazier. I'm president of Frazier Poly Engineering Service. We are a civil engineering design firm located in Boston. I wanted to touch base with some of the things that was mentioned about the RFP process. If you're online looking for an RFP, it's probably too late. It's what I think universities have to do is they have to tap into or talk to small businesses about their 6-month plan, their 12-month plan, or maybe their long-term 24-month plan. Because what can happen is that now a small business can have time to maybe network with other firms, create strategic partnerships and so forth to really help their business scale up and grow. I was reading the report, it said that 58% of the businesses that they deal with are between 1 to 10 employees. I would say probably if you break it down, you'll probably have maybe 40 or 50% or probably have 1 to 5 employees. Now, if you have 1 to 5 employees, you don't have time to respond to an RFP. And I've done it before with the city of Boston with responding to an RFP. It's just a limited amount of time, limited amount of resources. One of the things that Northeastern could probably do also is maybe having a relationship with maybe their marketing department, or have students maybe assist small businesses to create a marketing plan. The other thing that could also be helpful is if you have an RFP that you responded to what I would urge small businesses to do is to get feedback. If they didn't get, win the RFP, get feedback on maybe where, are there any steps that we can, improve our RFP? And also, what you may want to look for too is to get a copy of an RFP that was a winning RFP and just research that. Finally, I don't want to pick on Northeastern, but when we started the program, you mentioned that our Northeastern plans on doubling the amount of participation. There's two important questions that we have to ask. What is Northeastern's current percentage of minority businesses that win one RFP, and what is the dollar amount of that? Because we have to be careful about semantics. That it's not like saying, oh, we have 1% and now we're going to double it to 2. That's not helpful to anyone. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Kurt. Karen? Yeah.
So I have to underscore everything that was just said because he's right on point. But I would also say, when you say you're going to double it, if it's from 1% to 2%, my gosh. But what is the plan? You have to be intentional about this, because what we found in the research that we've done is that there are a lot of organizations who are talking the talk and not walking the walk. We're going to double the spend. How are you going to get there? How are you going to measure that you're going to get there? What are you going to do to get there? Folks are not intentional, and it's not just going to fall out of the sky. So what you must have a initiative, a program that someone is overseeing. It's someone's job. It's not off the side of the desk, but someone is committed to doing this. We were talking earlier about how many websites are out there with all of these companies saying supplier diversity, but nothing is happening. It is just really talking the talk. So companies must be intentional. If they're going from 1% to 2%, how are you going to get there? What are you going to do to get there? How are you going to measure it? How are you going to incent people to make sure that it's happening?
Thank you, Karen. Tim?
Can I follow? So the conversation we've been having for 4 years is the exact opposite, but it's kind of the exact opposite of what you're pushing for. Because the conversation has been going on for a long time, and it doesn't work. So you're saying go to 1 or 2%. What does that mean? We get a bigger contractor. So it didn't help you. You're not going to get in. The point we're trying to force is, if it's a project where there's an architect and they need a civil engineer, we want an architect to go out and find a new civil engineer that's women and minority owned. And we can force that because we're private. But when you go to a public project, you can't do that because they got to meet a percentage. And if you're not big enough and you haven't done this type of work before, you don't qualify, you're not going to get the job. So we're trying to fix that, and it's a really big challenge. Deb Anderson, who's the I forget her title, but she's a lawyer, attorney for the state. She's open to conversations on this type, and I had a conversation with her 3 weeks ago, and it went very poorly with the public owners that are in our group. So we want to force designers and contractors to say do these things, but we don't have a precedent to force it yet. I've got to figure that out, and I'm talking with Janet Christos from MSCBA actually on Thursday to see if we can figure that out. But it's a bigger conversation than just saying increase percentages. It hasn't worked. It's not going to work. It's got to be more than that, and that's the conversation that I'm trying to just force while I'm sitting here, anyways.
Tim rightly said, the percentages are not working. If you look last 15, 20 years, even the public sector, MBE, workforce, minority business participation, they're all through, like one of the things you touched on, a prime contractor or a bigger architect firm taking a smaller architect firm. Till we figure out a way to actually get the money directly into the hands of small businesses, I don't think it's going to make a big difference. I think that's when the businesses would be empowered, knowing that money is coming directly. There's no partnerships in between, middlemen. That will help them to leverage the cash flows, their business backlogs to grow the businesses. If not, it'll be just paying us the service, the policies of just maintaining the status quo. I think you need to bring the money into the pocket so they can leverage it and grow the businesses.
I'm getting excited.
Our timekeeper is, so we have the opportunity actually to continue because we have another hour. Unfortunately, it is a time I want to make maybe can we do one fun thing? I'm asking timekeeper there.
So really quickly,
Sure.
I respect all the opinions that it hasn't worked on a large scale, but I don't want us to say that it cannot work. I will give the example of Eastern Bank and Quincy Miller at Eastern Bank, who has done a phenomenal job of saying, we're going to increase this business, and he has put together a plan, again, where they identify what is the spend they have. They look for the minority businesses. They incent people to make sure they're they're taking the risk to get those new businesses in, and it is working. So again, respectfully, it probably hasn't worked in a large scale, but I don't want to say that it cannot work.
Can I go one? So what you're saying is the same thing we're saying. Okay. So the force that doesn't work is you've got to meet 20%, so I can go hire that big firm and boom, I'm good. You said what we said, no, get those small firms. Yeah. If your goal is to get those small firms, you're good. Public projects are completely percentage driven, and you can't, if you're small, you're not making a difference. You're not even moving the needle. Why am I going to invite you in? That's what the problem is. Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much to the online participants. We'll find other ways to get this conversation going. For the people here at the Cabral Center, please stay here. We'll continue the conversation at the tables. You will find, you will receive the report via email if you have not already received it. And the recordings will be available on our website and the website, the Lab for Inclusive Entrepreneurship. And please get in touch. I agree with Gordon. We do have more to do in terms of reaching out. This is the first. This is the first, and we will continue. Please be in touch. Thank you so much for being there.
Hey,